Well, good morning and good evening. Nice to see you on Zoom. Maybe I'll just share the names of us so that we all know who's here. So in the Zendo we've got Alex, Griffin, Rain, Mavanui and myself Neti. And on Zoom we've got Joe, Pam, Scott and Mark. So welcome. Suzuki Roshi made a comment in one of his articles in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, that we call ourselves Buddhists because we follow the teachings of Buddha. But actually, all we're doing is wanting to understand the truth in its many, many forms. So I thought that would be an interesting theme for this talk. Because the way we understand truth or reality, the way we understand it, profoundly impacts how we engage with the world. In our tradition, there's a number of different ways of looking at reality. One is from the side of the objects that we perceive, and one is from the side of the subject, the one perceiving them. From the side of the object, we have the teachings of Nagarjuna, the Middleweight Teachings. And in those teachings, Nagarjuna uses logic to help us not so much define what reality is, but to examine what it isn't. And it's very useful for us to examine our assumptions about reality. Because the assumptions we have about reality, if we don't explore them, we can be making mistakes over and over and over. So Nagarjuna's teachings are very subtle and quite difficult to penetrate. And I would strongly recommend that if you're interested in Nagarjuna's writings, that it's a great thing to do with other people. Have a small study group, or at least read a section and then discuss it with a teacher or discuss it with another Sangha member, another community member, and really let yourself be open to what Nagarjuna has to offer us. And one thing I like about his teachings is he's not defining what reality is, he's just dismantling what it isn't. And just as an example, just a small example of the impact of his teachings on my own practice, I know we often hear things like be here now, or just be present, or this present moment, and that's very useful for us to think about, being here now, being present. Of course, we can't be anywhere else. We are here. We can't be some other place. We can't be in the past. We can't be in the future. And we can't be over there. The only place we could possibly be anyway is here now. But nevertheless, if we look closely at here and now, we can't locate it. We can't locate it. And Nagarjuna's writings about that very closely examining how we cannot locate the past, we cannot locate the future, and we can't even locate the present. We can't locate there, and we can't locate here. I found that it really deepened my practice in a way that I can't explain. But one thing it did do is, when I have the thought, be here now, I don't have the idea that I know what I'm talking about, because I can't find now. So when we say things like, well, just be here now, or just be mindful, after examining Nagarjuna's teachings for a while, it's like, well, I don't even know what that is. And that can be extremely helpful for our practice. It keeps our mind flexible. It keeps our mind open. It allows for sort of endless curiosity that even the simplest thing like now or here, even that we don't grab onto. So there, the Middleweight Teachings examining what it is that we perceive, examining the external world, you could say, from that perspective, and examining that we can't pin it down. And then there's teachings from the side of the subject. These are sometimes referred to as the Chittamatra mind-only teachings, and it examines how it is that we perceive. And maybe a good subject for another talk would be the 8 consciousnesses, which I won't talk about today, but that's the way in which the Yogacara Chittamatra teachings make sense of our experience, is through the 8 consciousnesses. So we'll just tag that for a future talk. And again, something also really would be worth studying with somebody, with community. So the teachings, the mind-only teachings, don't so much use logic the way Nagarjuna's teachings use logic. They use zazen, meditation and contemplation, deeply sitting with what is going on with my mind, what is happening when I hear a sound. And one of the most basic points of looking at the perceiver of things is the discovery through deep contemplation that we can't locate the perceiver, we can't locate the one who perceives things, and we can't locate the things that are perceived, as Nagarjuna has describes in his writings. So this very basic assumption that most of us walk around with, that I see things, when we really look closely, we can't find the eye that sees anything. And society, generally speaking, does come from the position that there is an eye that does see things, that there's a person that gets things, that manipulates things, that engages with things. And something I find very helpful is one way of describing the nature of reality that we can't comprehend is the Chittamatra tradition is the 3 natures. So I'd like to really just talk about them a little bit. The first nature is called the imaginary nature, or you could call it the imputational nature. And this, funnily enough, is the one that most people actually believe is real. And here we call it the imaginary nature, the imputational nature. And this is the nature that says, this is a pair of glasses, this is a teaching stick. And it says that with the unfortunate consequence of thinking, this is all this is. This is a teaching stick. This is a pair of glasses. The imputation that I put onto it makes it real. That is a tree. It is nothing but a tree. And because it's nothing but a tree, and I am nothing but myself, I can choose to cut down that tree and turn it into money. There's nothing wrong with that, because that thing over there is a tree, and I'm a person, and I have the capacity to cut it down and turn it into money. That is what happens when we believe the imaginary nature, the imputational nature of things. The second nature in this model is called the dependent nature. And this is more useful. This is a more useful thing for us. I mean, the imputational imaginary nature, of course, is very useful. We do need it, obviously. We just, if it's our only part of the model of what reality is, then it becomes a disaster. So this second nature, the dependent nature, is also very useful. It is the nature that sees that all things require each other to exist. So right now, we've got a camera here, We've got Alex, who knows how to use the camera. We've got me giving the talk. We've got people in the Zendo. We've got a building, and we've got people on Zoom. And together, we are creating this thing. Together, we're making it happen. But the slight limitation, which turns out to be a significant limitation, of seeing things just as in relationship to each other, being dependent upon each other, is there still is a sense that there is others, that there's a self and there are others. There's still a sense that, for example, the tree exists, and it exists because the sun exists and provides rain for it and so on, and the rain exists. But it doesn't dismantle the possibility that the tree doesn't exactly exist. It's still seeing things as things in relation to each other. There's 2 things, they relate to each other. There's 5 things, they relate to each other. Or the more subtle you get, you might say there's 100 things and they relate to each other. And the limitation with this view, if this is as far as the view goes, is it doesn't necessarily have an ethical component to it. Because you can say, well, I need people to help me make money, so therefore I shall exploit them. But I'll make sure to keep them by paying them enough. So I pay them enough so that they'll stay because I need them. So that is a little better than seeing that there's no relationship, but you can see how easily that relationship still can have its limitations. It still has its limitations. So this dependent nature is true, and it's important, and we value it, and it's functional and useful to us, but it isn't actually still the whole story. The third nature is, you can call it, it's got many names. True nature, the truly existent nature, the consummate nature, the ultimate nature. And this is where we take the dependent nature and we really examine it so closely that we end up discovering that there is absolutely no division between anything at all. And because there's no division between anything at all, there isn't anything at all. There's nothing that is outside of us. There is nothing that is unimportant. We use the word thing because we just have language. So even though I say there is nothing outside of it and nothing that is not important, the word thing sounds like we're talking, well, we're using that conventional truth, the imputational nature. That's just because we have language. But if we just know that that's the case and don't worry about it, there's absolutely nothing outside of the unity of all things, and that is the consummate nature. And this quality of seeing that absolutely nothing is outside of everything, complete unification of everything at all times, this is, if we contemplate this, this is an object of purification. When we contemplate this, this is when we really can purify the delusions of our mind, purify the deluded thoughts that we have acquired in our culture. So this is really the place to contemplate the consummate nature. And the reason it's purifying is because it's the most true. It's just the most true. And whenever we do anything that is most true, it's most wholesome. And the opposite is also the case. When we do something that is unwholesome, it is less true. When we do things that are less true, it is less wholesome, less beneficial. So right now, at this point in history, as I think all of us here in this collective space we are in, understand that we are in a stage of ecological collapse. We all are aware of that here. We've moved out of the Holocene and into the Anthropocene. And I feel now that it's critical that we take the Buddhist teachings and find a way for them to be relevant to this circumstance that we're now in. And recently, David Loy wrote an article in Tricycle about this very thing. And I just wanted to share a quote that he includes there, which I can do without my glasses. This is a quote from Dom Helder Camara, who was a Brazilian Catholic archbishop. Some of you may be aware that there's a long history of sort of liberation theology in South America, Central and South America. And he was part of that movement. And he is well known for this saying, when I give food to the poor, they call me a saint. When I ask why poor people have no food, they call me a communist. And so David Loy wondered, he posed the question, do we have a Buddhist equivalent of this? Is there a spot at which we feel it's not appropriate for us as practitioners to go? And just as an example from myself, not from David Loy, it's great that we do recycling. It may be good that we're involved in some environmental groups, but is there a point at which our tradition feels that we have stepped too far to the equivalent of, say, becoming a communist? Is there a point at which our tradition kind of subtly or not so subtly says, don't go there, now you're no longer really practicing our tradition? I think this is an important question, and it's a question that I'm personally working with. Where do I, as a student of the way, a student of the Buddha, what do I do with my body? What do I do with my speech in this time of ecological collapse? So one way that we could look at these three natures that would be useful to us in relation to this situation, not this situation, it's not the right language to use, in relation to this emergency that we are in, sort of slowly unfolding in terms of human timeframes, a slowly unfolding emergency, but a very rapid emergency, is to look at these three natures and how we each relate to them, how each of us relate to the imaginary nature, the dependent nature, and the ultimate nature, and to become more aware, moment by moment, of which of those natures are we engaging in, which of those natures are we being cognizant of, because there's a time to be cognizant of each of them for each of them to be more in a primary position, but we want to have all of them somewhere within reach of our mind, reach of our conscious mind all the time. But at certain moments, one is going to be more dominant. So what we can do with our practice is just notice, where are we? And the particular places to notice is in situations that are more likely to engage us one way or the other. You know, if we're in a meeting and a meeting about what kind of action to do to awaken people to the climate emergency, for example. If there's one person at that meeting that's annoying us, do we kind of get hooked on the imputational nature, and we're having thoughts about what we don't like about them, or how they're ruining the meeting, or whatever we might be doing? And can we pull back from that and instead move back maybe more into the dependent nature and see, okay, all of us need each other. All of us need each other to be here in the Zendo. All of us need each other to be doing actions, sort of Extinction Rebellion actions. We all need each other. And to not lose sight of that. To not lose sight of that even if we're in disagreement with someone. And then can we move even further into not losing sight of the ultimate nature, that not only is that person important to us and to our goals, but that person is us. That person is us. And when we can keep that more primary in our mind, it's very hard to feel a lot of aversion. It's kind of hard. And that's beneficial for us not to feel aversion, even to those who are doing all the harm. It's better for us to not have aversion to them emotionally within ourselves. Better for us to feel an intimacy with them and compassion for them. Respectful compassion for them. And be thinking about, what can I do to try and turn them around? What can I do to help them see the world differently? And when we come from that place, from the consummate nature truth, when we come from that truth, it's very energizing. We don't get so tired. It's joyful because it is true, because it is the truth, because it's true. And when we function in the truth, things go more smoothly. They don't go necessarily well, but we're in accord. We're in accord, and when we're in accord, we have more power, and we don't create so much resistance internally. So the last thought I wanted to share on this is we also, an important part of our whole Buddhist tradition is to awaken, to individually awaken to reality, to awaken and experience realization for the benefit of all beings. That's why we do it, not for personal benefit. Doesn't make sense. Can't do it that way. We do it for the benefit of all beings. And it feels like now, at this time of history, and this is a comment that David Lloyd was also making, maybe we need to really consider, is there a way we can awaken everyone? Right now, is there a way that we can find the skillful means to awaken everyone to the profound interdependence, the profound interbeing of everything? Because if we don't, as we all know, if we don't, this whole beautiful world that we have right now is going to collapse into something else. And it will be reborn, but it would be sad for it to collapse. And so now is the time that the personal awakening needs to continue, but also how can we really, in our minds, think, how can I wake everybody up? Urgently, how do we wake everybody up? And how can we do it with our limited capacity? And it's important that we all have limited capacity, and that's just great. We just have to go with our limited capacity. Whatever you're good at, just put that forward and do it. And whatever you're kind of mediocre at, put that forward too. And be okay with your limited ability to do something. Just do it anyway. So I think that's all I'd like to say right now. I do want to just offer merit. Sometimes it's nice to offer merit, the merit of hearing and receiving and giving this talk. I'd like to offer the merit to the father of my older children who had open heart surgery yesterday, and he's in the ICU. And so in offering merit to him, we're actually, by knowing that he is the whole universe, by offering merit to him, we are offering merit to everyone. You know? That is offering merit to everyone. So whenever we do a kindness to one person and remember that that one person is the whole universe, we are doing kindness to the whole universe. If we don't remember and we do kindness to one person, we could actually be doing sort of harm, because we're doing it exclusively and we're reinforcing the idea of separateness. And I only like these types of people, so I'm going to be nice to them and offer merit to them, but not to those people, or not to those animals, not to those insects. So when we remember the consummate nature and we offer merit or kindness to one, we are offering it to all. So let's just finish with our closing chant, and then we can go to questions and comments. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. All right, so anybody from here in the Zendo or on the Zoom Zendo like to comment or ask a question? Can you hear the birds on Zoom?
I have a question.
Navani.
Something that I've been thinking about a lot recently is how no matter what we do as individuals in practice and as a Sangha, it is in some way political. We can't really escape living in that world. I was thinking about how maybe like in ancient China, where, I don't know, the peasant monks really didn't have the opportunity for political power, it was possible to be apolitical, like, because there was really nothing political that they could do. But today, everybody has the capacity to exert some influence, and we actually do have some power. And as a result, everything we do does actually become political. And just sitting with the tension of that even like withdrawing completely from the world is a choice that has political ramifications. And so how, like, bringing that awareness into practice, sort of like what you were talking about with where does our tradition, where are those sort of ingrained beliefs in our tradition of like what is don't go there, and questioning like should we actually go there, and yeah, I was just wondering if you could speak more to that.
Thank you. I hope, were you able to hear that the comments from Mavami on Zoom? Could you hear her? Yeah. Okay. Yes, it's interesting the word political sometimes can be used as almost as a criticism. But of course it's just a word. There's no thing that is actually political. You can't pick it up, say, here we go, here's a political thing. So there's no such thing, it's just a concept. But as a word, in some ways it can be quite useful because it does point to the interconnectedness of things and the power of one's actions to influence other actions. And I think when it's used as an accusation, don't do that, that's too political, maybe what's underlying that is, you're scaring me because your actions might have an effect. I don't want them to. Cause and effect is the soup that we swim in. So everything we do has an effect. In that sense, everything is political if we use that word. And I think the challenge for us as practitioners is how do we just find a balance, because the activity of action to try and effortfully change things has a lot of energy, and our Zazen practice is very quiet and still and contemplative. So it's just a dance, I think. And I find myself, I'm always checking on that dance of activity and stillness. Activity and stillness. And one of the thoughts about maybe where our practice may be useful to the wider world of climate activists is that maybe we can bring in a kind of a groundedness that might be useful. So it's both directions, us entering more into the world of activism and us offering something that might be nourishing to those who don't have necessarily a spiritual practice.
Thank you for your talk, Neti. I just, strangely, I'm writing something using process philosophy in to critique something in education, the way psychologists work in education, and these themes that you're talking about are reflected in how we practice with children and how we create communities that support children and supporting particularly in their learning. And for me, because I'm like a researcher and a practitioner, and then it does become political, and there's no way around that in a way. And I think that there's a risk in that, in the sense that because you are trying to change something, and it can be very scary, and your job can be on the line because you're threatening a way of practice that earns money, that's well established, is what people know. And I mean, I think that the question is a very serious one, and I appreciate that line. That it's a dance between activity and stillness, and that how do I practice in a way that I think is terribly important for children, and how they can find a way of being and belonging. But I have to do that in an inclusive way, because firstly I can, I lose my job, or I'm misunderstood, I'm seen as a threat, and then everything just collapses. But it's such a big problem, and I'm conscious that there's Americans in our group, and when I see the news that's coming out of America and the division, using words like communist, it makes me wonder. So it's such a huge issue, and how you can make that dance between activity and stillness in a way that's inclusive and loving and kind and non-threatening. It's just, anyway, I think I could ramble and ramble because I'm just really struck by that. I know not in terms of climate change, but in terms of education and our communities and the well-being of all of us. While we see the ecological collapse.
Well, Joe, because from the position of the consummate nature, the work you are doing for children is helping the forests. Everything is connected. So anything that we do that is of benefit to all things. So I think it's also really important for us to really accept the diverse way in which people can be of benefit. There's so many ways to be of benefit, and we should do our best to support all the things that people are doing, because they all interconnect with each other. So your work is helping us. Your work with children helps adults. Your work with children helps animals. It helps the climate. And our work helping the climate is helping the children in the schools. It's not obvious how that works, but it's true. And one other thought I had as you were speaking is, I think maybe the difficulty, particularly with politics and the word politics, is the way political life is set up in the Western world is in a binary. It is adversarial. It's set up that way. And so we do need to be careful when we enter into it that we don't let that binary rub off on us, as it so easily can. And then that's probably why we need to be very careful about this dance of activity and stillness. Because another way of seeing activity and stillness is duality and non-duality. We have to be very careful when we're functioning in the world of duality that we don't forget the non-dual reality of profound interbeing. And the political world tends to be pretty polarized. So it's just a skillful practice. It's just mindfulness for us to navigate. So thank you.
I just was reminded as you were speaking about Thich Nhat Hanh's work with the Vietnam War, about how he he specifically wanted to do something to help, but he also didn't take sides.
Yes.
But what his action was deeply political, but it was not based on some political
Yes.
divides, and
Yes.
he ended up having a huge impact,
Yes.
but he kind of chose his own direction,
Yes.
sort of didn't like the options presented to him, but
Yes.
still wanted to help.
And in fact, the fact that he didn't take sides and helped everyone was the most threatening thing to the forces there, because it was showing that there actually is no difference between the North and the South, and Americans and Vietnamese and so on. And that was very threatening, and so he was exiled for that. So we might find that if we don't participate in the dualistic way in which politics works, that some people might find that particularly hard. But that is our job, to do it that way, to do it with no animosity, no hatred towards whoever we are trying to change. Very important that we do it that way. So I think we are coming to the end of our time. Thank you all for making this possible.